So I spent the last 2 months rebuilding Montmartre in Blender. This is my first attempt at stylized ArchViz, and keyword stylized ArchViz. I am not an architect at all. I am a 3D artist and hard sci-fi writer. So this is not really accurate architecture. This is mostly art for use in my hard sci-fi graphic novel stories. Honestly, I didn't think it would take this long. The reason I decided to dive into stylized ArchViz is because the settings in my hard sci-fi graphic novel series are based on real places around the world, and there's no better way to merge my skills in illustration, writing, and 3D art into one medium. So the truth is, I could never really draw real places without reference. If I do, they all end up looking generic and the drawing just becomes messy, which is not part of what I wanted to do at all, because I wanted places in my panels to actually be memorable for the readers. Some artists can just freestyle buildings, add little gribbles, and make it all look convincing. But for me, if the buildings don't have any specific details, they all end up looking generic. Maybe that's because of my hard sci-fi mindset where every machine or structure has to be thought out for me to care drawing about it. So that's where we are right now. Of course, I made mistakes and learned a lot in the last 2 months. Funny enough, many of the scenes you see here on the screen only appear in like 3 or 4 pages of the entire 90-page novel. So I recorded the entire process and now we'll go through it together as I comment on the progress bit by bit. Let's start the project. So I initially wanted to create an overarching view of Paris with the Eiffel Tower on the side as one double-page spread introduction in book 2 of my hard sci-fi graphic novel Void Trip. But realized I'd have to draw every single building at the top view, which is tiresome because I didn't know yet what French architecture is supposed to be, and also I didn't want to make it look generic. So I decided instead to choose any historical landmarks in the area, not just for simplicity but also to be reminded to not go with the standard stereotype anymore that any movie or story getting to France just has to have the Eiffel Tower in it every time to save face. Like, seriously guys, no other French place exists? So instead I picked a landmark that felt more down to earth, and I came with the La Consula restaurant. Well, a little restaurant at the intersection of Rue Norvins and the Rue Jean-Baptiste Clement Street, famous in its own right. Van Gogh and Dali used to hang out there, and it leads up to the Sacré-Cœur Basilica, more authentic, less cliche, and a lot less buildings for me to really care about getting all the details in. For the actual scene layout, I use Blender's OSM Pro add-on that I paid for. It connects to your different geographical information system that you want to choose. Well, you can choose anything as long as it's supported on their website. And for the shot, I went with ArcGIS. ArcGIS? Partly because of their solid reviews on terrain elevation data, and partly because their auto-generated building blocks will make your life way easier. Now in this specific moment here, I was able to import the terrain layout across the Faubourg Poissonnière district. Is that how you pronounce it? Yo! But as you can see, the capture selection is in a rectangle. I had to manually clear everything to cut exactly the shape of the district. The greatest task will then be, as a 3D artist, is when you want to have economy of lines, is to redirect the flow of the edges and point to the desired shape of the terrain. But that's easier said than done, as any expert in 3D modeling knows, is that in a very large scene, terrain is in a grid as usual, which results in a ton of polygons as your scene moves forward, and it doesn't help too that valleys, mountains, curved spaces for roads also exists. Originally, I was gonna capture all of Paris, which is like, how many kilometers is the Paris area? I'm not gonna search for it, but yeah, that's it. But yeah, so originally I was gonna capture all of Paris, but my computer can't handle it. Blender crashed after 15 minutes, so At this point, the outline of the district is finally starting to show. Surprisingly, this only took around 200 megabytes of VRAM, even with all the basic building cubes generated from the OSM. The roads generated via curves are actually surprisingly accurate when you look at your real map data via Google Maps or whatever. They even group them by type: sidewalks, walkways, traffic, roads, bridges. I didn't end up using them. Curves in the shrink wrap modifier just don't play well nicely for some reason, but I still appreciate the feature being there. Same with the terrain, the elevation data is there, reasonably accurate, and the building block silhouettes give you a rough layout. Obviously the heights are going to be way off because that's just what it is, but that's expected with this kind of auto-generated data. Now, as you can see here, one thing I always do, I rename everything with a strict naming standard. It saves my sanity for later, and also I hope for you as well. So my format is usually country, then the name of the city, and then the place, and then the feature. For example, here you can see me renaming the terrain into France _ Paris _ Montmartre _ terrain. Same thing with the buildings as well, France _ Paris _ Montmartre _ buildings. It looks obsessive, but trust me, when you're handling hundreds of objects, the naming habit is a lifesaver. And here now, we're moving to the Rue Norvins Road to get to the La Consola restaurant. And here it is right there. Let's land down there. And you can see here, it matches exactly as per the pictures and videos of the place. Now in the next moments forward, it's just gonna be me modeling the place in time-lapse. This isn't gonna be a tutorial video of sorts. This video is just of me modeling the place for 2 months. Sit back and watch. Here you can see I manually placed the windows, and the building itself was made from scratch. That's a 6-foot person, by the way, there to scale. Now the actual height of said building, I just ad-libbed it. My goal was more about capturing the vibe and the appearance of the place rather than following engineering grade measurements. So now you can see the basic look of the restaurant start to pop out. Now when doing stylized versions of real buildings like this, my tip is that it's best to start with a facade. How many doors, the general proportions, and the window style. In France, for example, the tall windows with shutters are almost a given, the iconic French windows that we all see everywhere around the world. From there, you add the defining external details, like the awnings, balconies, roof, shapes, or even the styles of doors. These little features usually are the ones that really carry the personality of the building more than the type of walls it has itself or the type of flower decorations that it has. Here, for example, for the Reconstruction restaurant, you can see the double doors for the restaurant entrance and the shield insignia in the middle floor. It's small stuff, but it's what sells the vibe, because in stylization, you don't need to model every centimeter, just the soul of the place. I could go on and on, but really, the number one things you have to take note. First is the core structure. What is the building's overall face? The number of floors, the roof shape and pitch, is it flat, gabled, or mansard, especially in Paris? The second is the windows and doors. For example, what is its window type? Like, is it arched, rectangular, dormer? What is its window rhythm or pattern? Is it evenly spaced, clustered, or irregular? And next is the door style. Is it a single door, double, glass paneled? And then the shutters, of course. In this case of France, for example, not every architecture in the world has that, but that's one example of the windows and doors. And then the third one, of course, is the exterior features, which you can see the balcony railings, which I'm gonna add later, the awnings, canopies, and really that's all the core features you have to take note when trying to make a stylized version of a building. Well, really, I could make this list long, but this is not what that video is about, so I'm just gonna leave it there. Before I jump into the time lapse of modeling, I want to quickly show you how I handle textures. That way, when you see me fiddling on the right panel, you'll actually know what's happening. So to be perfectly honest, I don't really texture my models, like, at all. Most of my time goes into the fun stuff in 3D modeling and truly mastering the craft, from proper topology, keeping edge flow clean, minimization of n-gons, termination of lines, best edge flow techniques, learning how drivers work for animation and mechanical rigs, sculpting, you name it. And everybody asks, yes, I understand what UV unwrapping is. Yes, I know how creating seams and projection unwrapping works. I know exactly how it works, okay? I actually only add flat texture colors to my models and scenes. Well, yeah, that's still a texture, but I don't go to Substance Painter and create a texture for one object. I actually created my own 1920 by 1920 image of these grid collection of colors that I actually use for all my models across many blend files. As you can see here on the top left is the RGB spectrum that I divided into 24 columns. These are the base rainbow colors that I use on any objects that have different color gradient types, you name it, all colors. At the bottom is the base white, blues, and browns, which I use for most basic gray gradient colors. On the right are different categories of preset colors that I use the most. You can see here is the skin tone browns, apricots, and reddish pinks at the very top. A set of mini palettes, which I divided just to be the mini versions of the full palette from the left, divided into 6 columns from lightest to darkest, as this can easily give you the best case scenario most of the time. And then the browns, which I use for like trees and wood and metals here, which I guess can go hand in hand with browns to produce bronze or gold colors. And on the bottom here is actually the Denman 9 shading gradients, which I only figured out was a thing last year. This is the standard that I recommend anybody to use if you're a beginner to shading. For me, this is what I utilize in the shading of my graphic novel pages. I originally wanted to do color first, but even then, if I had a complete flat style, even if I had a completely flat style, like Mobius or Boudieu de Ville, full color eats so much time. So I went grayscale first, and this palette helps keep things consistent. And on the bottom are just a mishmash of colors I may have missed. So yeah, that's it. That's my texture pack. It's all just one image slapped into everything. And honestly, it works. As you can see here in my recreation of the Deutsches Zentrum für Luft Center in Germany, I use this same texture on all objects. I let cycles, lighting, and reflections do all the heavy lifting, and it still communicates the vibe I'm going for. Saves me time and lets me focus on designing places instead of obsessing over UV seams. Okay, now here's where I actually begin the texturing process. But let me be clear, it's not all just flat colors technically. There is one big exception: the signages. The logos, plaques, shop signs, restaurant menus, basically the things that give the building its identity. So yeah, I actually do make custom textures, just not for bricks, tiles, or wood grains. Now you can see me here, I'm actually right now searching for a couple of French fonts that I could use to mimic the fonts used in the real place. I got to Google Fonts for some free use fonts and got around some that I don't even remember the name of. I'm utilizing a formal font and a Parisian signature font. One of them here is Playfair Display, which is a modern serif font which gives off a not too slice or clean feel, but still has that elegant curve that doesn't make it too robustly rigid like Roman serif fonts. Looking back at the restaurant here and with the Parisian buildings in general, we got the awnings with the shop's title, the restaurant's menu display outside, and you can also see the surrounding shops as well, which I and also you should also take into account when searching for these fonts. You can see there the now closed Rupolvo Pizzeria also has its own unique font, so this will be some work, or maybe I can just choose to use the same font for it. That's why I think of signages almost like the character design of the building. You could reuse the same font for everything to save time, sure, but hunting down the right one, even if it's just close, adds a ton of authenticity. Now here, I'm jumping into Krita to set up a 1920 by 1920 canvas that I can just use to hold up all the signages. You'll see me here trying to reconstruct the look of each sign as closely as possible. Honestly, I had to dig deep through online photos and even Google Street Maps view just to figure out what the plaques, menus, and shop fronts actually said. And it wasn't only for the Le Consulat, I had to do the same thing for the La Bonne Franquette, which is another historical restaurant landmark, and basically every single building across this whole stretch of Montmartre. To make it easier, I lay everything out using my color grid collection instead of manually picking colors from the wheel every time, as you can see here in action. And yeah, even the menus had to be recreated, from the stroke text with the little shadows all the way down to the actual food items they listed. You'll also notice I included the Rue Norvin street sign and of course the Le Consulat sign front and center at the top right. The idea is to get it as close to the real one as possible. And of course this is only going to be for this building because it's what's gonna appear in renders mostly to be the recognizable spot. Now, I'll show you a time lapse of the whole process here, just sit back and enjoy and watch it come together. Now that you've seen my approach to texture making, let's move inside the building. I'm not going to do this for every single building, but since La Consola is going to be featured in a render, it needs a proper interior. That means adding tables, chairs, wine bottles, lights, and of course, the bar. To do that, we'll switch over to another file that I keep, furniture_collection.blend. Over the years, ever since I started 3D modeling back in junior high school and really got fluent in college when I had finally bought my very first gaming laptop, I've built a massive library of objects. This collection right here pretty much has everything: chairs, sofas, tables, desks, cabinets, kitchenware, curtains, beds, office supplies, you name it. Most of them are in low or mid poly, detailed enough to look good but light enough to use in any scene. As you can see there from the open menu, I've also created industrial collections, food collections, which you saw earlier, you name it, all of it. Well, really not literally everything, but you get my point. I've been doing this for a while now. The reason I do this is simple. I know exactly how each model was built. They're all clean quads, no messy topology, no hidden n-gons, and I don't have to rant about someone else's paid asset being over detailed or broken. These are built to my standards so I can trust them. Now, as you can see, I've already set up the floor of the Le Consola. It's time to put the furnitures in. Now I've finished the Le Consola interior slightly and the exteriors finished. Right now I'm going to try to polish out the terrain grounds, because you see, the intersecting terrain doesn't match up to the level of the building. As you can see, the building is slightly buried, and yeah, that's one of the problems that you're gonna encounter. Or the building doesn't match the level of the terrain. Like, what? Okay, so here's the thing. The generated terrain mesh isn't exactly a full-on 100% accurate reading of the city or place on Earth that you want. Because 1, the generated terrain is just a grid mesh. Making it exactly the same is going to produce a lot of polygons which you don't want. And number 2, the data they're pulling from isn't exactly going to be perfect. So you may be wondering, how does ArcGIS or any other OSM service manage to get these readings off of any place on Earth, pretty much anywhere on the planet, of these terrain elevations and building placements, and even sometimes tree placement, which of course I didn't do that here. So here's how it actually works. So the said GIS service is usually a mix of a few methods to guess the terrain shape. Sometimes it's a satellite radar like NASA's Shuttle Radar Topography mission, basically bouncing radio waves off of the Earth to get rough height maps through its many revolutions around the Earth since its launch. Then in other regions, they'll use area lidars where planes scan the ground with lasers. Then you've got photogrammetry, which is just a fancy way of saying that they've stitched a million overlapping photos together and triangulated the height. And finally, a lot of it comes from old ground surveys that governments digitized into modern datasets. So yeah, it's good enough to give Montmartre's hills and slopes, but not so accurate that the cafe won't sometimes float above the sidewalk like it's in Inception. Which means I still have, or you still have to tweak things by hand in Blender or any kind of 3D modeling software you use. But this also creates the new problem. If this section's height is already off, what happens when I try to move a few meters north? That tiny mismatch can snowball. Maybe the terrain itself rises half a meter too much, and suddenly what should be a gentle 15% uphill slope looks like a brutal 25%. Now the shops look like they're perched halfway up a mountain, which completely breaks the vibe of the real Montmartre streets. But for now, I'll show you how I modeled the buildings to make up for this slope. See, in Mediterranean and older European architecture, foundations often follow the flow of the land. Builders didn't flatten the ground with concrete like we do today. They flattened the structure to the slope. Montmartre, being hilly, is a perfect example of that. At first, which I kinda regret now, I treated the building and its foundation as one single mesh. My logic was simple. If the slope shifts, I can just move the base edges of the foundation to match. Sounds fine, right? Well, except it wasn't. Because once the slope got even more detailed, I had to cut extra cuts to the foundation mesh. And since it was fused with the building itself, those cuts carried up through the entire model. Totally messy. Really, the best practice here is to model the foundation as a separate mesh in the object. That way, if the foundation isn't level, or no, the ground isn't level, you only adjust the base without wrecking the entire building's topology. I only realized this later when I started experimenting with interiors. The windows cuts weren't deep enough to line up with balcony railings, and it hit me. What if I need this building again in a later novel where the interiors actually matter? That's when the regret really set in. So yeah, lesson learned the hard way. And so that's all I have to say for this one. Enjoy the time-lapse video going forward until we get to the renders. And finally, after 2 months, I was finally able to finish the entire place. Here are the 4K renders. Oh no, it's not. Is this? Oh yeah, the 4K renders of different angles of the place. This is only 500 samples, so I can make it quick. But as you can see, it matches the look exactly as it would have looked like in real life. Of course, this is stylized. You can see here at the intersection of the Rue Norbis and Jean Clement Street. You can see the consulat and another historical landmark on the left, which I forgot what the name was. Here in the second picture, you can see more of the inner sanctums. You can see the La Bonne Franquette restaurant with the gallery on the left side. The third one here is the La Bonne Franquette view with the Galerie des Arts Céramiques on the right. I really like the lighting on this one. It's probably amateurish lighting, but you get my point. And the fourth here, which is the intersection, which leads to the Place du Tartre on the left side of the Le Consulat here. And on the next image here is exactly the entrance to the Place du Tartre. You can see there on the rightmost side is Starbucks, which I was never able to render, but you can see there the Toussaint restaurant. What restaurant is that? Yeah, Toussaint restaurant. And on the next image here, you can see where I was complaining about the uneven slopes on OSM terrains, where, as you can see here, this is not what it looks like in real life. In real life, it's just a very small slope, probably like 5 to 10% uphill, but you can see the Belle Art Gallery and the Biscuiterie de Montmartre on the left side here with a brown facade exterior. The seventh image here, which is of Place du Tartre, and as you can see there, the uneven terrain really shows up here, where it's really all the way down, and that's not what it looks like in real life at all. I was never able to fix that because I already had buildings in place, which is really the problem when it comes to all this. But the look looks nice anyway. You can see there the Le Crémaillère buildings, and here on the 8th image, you can see the Alcadet de Gascogne with a very nice view of the, what was the name of this blue accented restaurant just here? I can't remember. Here on the 11th page, you can see the other side, which you can see here are the restaurants and the La Crémaillère. And what was the name of this restaurant? Well, why can't I remember names, my dude? And here on the 12th, you can see the La Bohème de Montmartre event building. No, it's not an event building. It's kind of like where it's not just a restaurant. What do you call that? Oh my goodness. Anybody in the comments, just please put it if I made a lot of errors. But yeah, this is the entire 2-month course of events that led me to trying stylized ArchViz for the first time. If any French viewers, does it look exactly like the real place? Even if it isn't exactly right architecturally, does the vibe match? Does the image evoke exactly what it would look like if it was cartoonish? You know what I'm saying? So I'm gonna leave a link to my DeviantArt page, or I guess my Cara art page, if you want to see the rest of the images. But yeah, thank you for tuning into this video. This is my first video, but I hope you enjoyed the contents. And if you like stylized ArchViz too, what real places have you ever created in your projects? We would like to know. So I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Like if you like, and dislike if you dislike, and I'll see you guys next time.